evening, everyone, and welcome to the Worcester 4th District State Representative debate, where we have Salvatore Perla, the challenger, Natalie Higgins, the incumbent. And let's get ready to rumble, folks. Right to the questions. Running for political office can be a time-consuming, expensive, and oftentimes thankless endeavor. You're both people who have run for and have won political office on multiple occasions. So what motivates you to keep taking this on? And we had a coin flip, so we're starting with Salvatore Perla. Reminder, 2 minutes each to answer the direct question, then that's followed by 5 minutes of general discussion, and then we move on to the next question.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me tonight. What motivates me is it starts back in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. You know, it was a time where as a change needed to be made at the school committee level. Myself, along with other parents, decided to make that change. Now I see it at a state level where a change needs to happen to keep moving in the right direction. I really want what's best for the people of Leominster, people of Massachusetts. Some of the stuff that we've been going on currently, I feel, is going in wrong directions in some ways, good directions in others, but there's definitely avenues that we could take to make the state better, the city of Leominster better, and that's what motivates me.
Representative Higgins.
Thank you, Michael. I've had the pleasure of representing the city of Leominster for the last 8 years, and it is the city that I'm so grateful that I get to call home for my entire life. Growing up in Leominster in a working class family, my parents are small business owners. Government wasn't a place where they could turn to for help. It felt like a lot of red tape, a lot of confusion, a lot of inaccessibility. When I decided to run in 2016, I ran in a really tough time politically, really to make sure that Leominster had an accessible state representative. That meant having a full-time office, having office hours and off hours early in the morning, in the evenings when people could access me. And together, we've helped over 3,500 families access state benefits, things that they shouldn't have to call the state rep for, but I'm really grateful that they know to reach out and that they're sending their friends my way when they're hitting a logjam, when they're hitting a barrier, when they don't know where to turn. I am incredibly grateful to work on legislative advocacy as well in spaces that I have some personal experience and work expertise. Prior to running for office, I ran a nonprofit that fought for affordable, debt-free public higher education. I'm the first in my family to go to college. My dad didn't have the opportunity to finish high school, and he instilled in us that college was an option for us, and that education was going to be something that was attainable. And so I was able to earn a degree at UMass. My brother earned his degree at Mass Bay Community College, and we pay it forward, making sure that more folks have access to public higher education. And I spent about a decade as a rape crisis counselor, seeing all the ways that the state laws fail survivors and don't meet them when they need them. And I've been really grateful to lead bipartisan efforts to end the backlog of untested sexual assault evidence kits and continue to show up for domestic violence survivors and change the laws for the better.
Thank you both. Any follow-up for either of you regarding that? All right. We good?
Good.
All right. Well, hey, that saves time for some discussion on some of the other questions. All right, second question. State representatives are, by nature, the elected officials in the state who are the closest to the people. In other words, the ratio to resident to representative is lowest when it comes to a state representative in terms of number of people, number of representatives. As such, the state rep is often the first person that someone will turn to for help in navigating the waters for government help. What are some ways in which you can each ensure that residents are getting effective constituent services? Representative Higgins, 2 minutes.
I focused on constituent services from day one. It is something that Leominster needs, being a gateway city, and I'm really grateful that Leominster gets its state rep all to itself, right? I'm one of a handful of state representatives that get one community in their entirety. And in that way, I really get to dig in and build deep connections across a whole lot of community organizations. And we're working to make sure that we're always connecting folks to the right resources as quickly as possible, but helping community providers know when they can call in for help, when they're facing log jams. And so working with groups like Ginny's Helping Hand and the Spanish American Center and Catholic Charities, making sure that they have everything that they need to represent their community and show up for them and really shoulder this burden together. Folks still 8 years in are surprised when I call them back. That's a failing of government, right? Like, folks should not be surprised that I returned their call. That is the least I can do, and I follow up with, I hope I can fix your issue too, and we're gonna keep working until we can. We surround our office by signs that say everything is figure-outable, right? Like, the impossible just takes a little bit longer because we wanna remind me and my staff every single day that sometimes we see a challenge we haven't seen before. It's probably not the last time we're gonna see that challenge, and we better figure it out and not leave someone hanging. And I'm grateful that I get to focus on that each and every day, that I'm Leominster State Representative.
Can you just repeat
Mr.
the question
Perla.
again? Can you repeat it again real quick?
Certainly. State representatives are by nature the elected officials in the state who are closest to the people in terms of ratio of resident to representative. So what are some ways in which you can ensure that local services are being tended to, that residents are getting effective constituent services?
I'm very well versed making sure I'm there for the people. My normal job, I'm a human resource manager. This job is a 24/7 job. I don't expect to go to sleep. You know, if somebody needs me at 2 in the morning, I'll be there. That's what I do now for my job. It's one of those positions where you got to find the answer for the person, right or wrong. It doesn't have, sometimes people don't like the answer they're going to get, but you got to find them that answer. There's a ton of services for people to use. You got to find out what one works best for them. And if that's working night and day to find that for them, that's what you got to do. As an HR manager currently, that's all I'm doing every day. I'm working to ensure that my team, the people that I serve, have what they need to do their job successfully. And I will make sure that the constituents, the citizens, has everything they need to make sure that their livelihood is going in the right direction, or whatever services they need, they can have.
Any follow-up discussion?
Yeah, I just would like to add, one of the special things of being state representative is we get to file bills on behalf of residents who are facing challenges that other residents are facing across the Commonwealth. So sometimes when we can't find the answer within a state agency, we're working with our constituents to draft a bill to address that issue. And some of the best bills that I've gotten to work on are crafted by Leominster residents, by real-world stories and challenges that their family has faced. One I would just like to highlight is a 911 indicator form that I worked on with a constituent, Carrie, who wanted to make sure that when first responders were showing up to an emergency at someone's home, that they were prepared with kind of what situation, what needs. You can right now include people's disability status, but you can't add a lot of extra information. So we want to make sure that people's mental health needs, in her case, she was concerned about residents on the autism spectrum, making sure that our first responders are equipped with what they need to be able to show up for the community in a better way. And those are some really special ways that we get to lift up our constituents' voices across the state.
Follow up with that, across the state, my job brings me to some pretty, low income areas, Lynn, Revere, Hyde Park, New Bedford, Fall River, and I see, my teams are from those neighborhoods. I see what they have to deal with on a daily basis, the struggles that they have, and the services that I've helped them in those areas, I know I could help in the Leominster area. It's tough out there for people, and we need someone, not saying Representative Higgins doesn't do this, but someone that's going to be there for them to make sure that when they're down on their luck, or they need something, or they're in a jam with something, that someone's going to be there in their corner fighting for them.
So just as a little bit of a follow-up to help stimulate discussion here, both of you have experience. Your role as an elected school committee representative, your role as the incumbent state representative of obviously doing this already, and that's one advantage that you have. You've already talked about that. So I would say, ask to Mr. Perla, what is something that you would do completely different outside of the box that maybe you haven't seen done, over the last few years? And likewise, Representative Higgins, what is something that you might think of doing outside of the box that hasn't been done last few years? So essentially the same question, just from different perspectives. Go ahead.
And again, I'm not sure if Representative Higgins has done this before, but really getting a sense of community with other state representatives from the local districts, seeing the different areas that they might be struggling in. Again, I've worked with representatives in these other neighborhoods and hearing the stuff that they're dealing with, that they're trying to get done at the state level. It's really trying to get that network and making sure, not just Leominster, but even the surrounding communities, because we do have people that are from the surrounding communities that come into Leominster for certain things, or even move into Leominster, that making sure that as a whole collective that we're all working together.
Yeah, I would just like to piggyback off of that. It's really special being a part of the North Central delegation. We have the most diverse politically delegation in the state. And, we represent North Central Mass, a smaller region by the rest of the state standards. We really have to speak with a unified voice to make sure that we can get the attention of leadership, right? We're dwarfed by the Boston delegation. So it's really special when a delegation that spans from pretty conservative Republicans to really liberal Democrats and our only independent member of the state legislature can speak with one voice. We can get a lot done with that. Michael, to your question of what can we do better, some of the things that we've been bringing from the state delegation work is kind of down into the community, making sure that there's more collaboration amongst community organizations, more sharing of resources, and doing that across communities. In a lot of ways, we face some barriers because the state looks at two gateway cities, Leominster and Fitchburg, and says, as long as we put the services in Fitchburg, they'll be accessible to the Leominster residents. And helping state officials understand just how many barriers there are for our residents to even be able to go to the city next door and access those resources, and sometimes the shame and stigma of, I don't need that help as much as I think other folks need it. And really dispelling that to say, it's not pie, you don't run out of it, right? Like, we're gonna make sure there's enough resources there for everyone who needs it. But breaking down some of those silos and getting some collaboration is something the delegation has been really good at doing.
Thank you, folks. We'll move on to the next question. There are many ballot questions on tap this election in Massachusetts. Very active ballot question season. There's question 1, providing authority to audit the state legislature. Question 2, whether or not to abolish the MCAS high school graduation requirement. Question 3, allowing collective bargaining for rideshare drivers. Question 4, legalizing and regulating some psychedelic drugs, and question 5, requiring employers of tipped workers to pay the standard minimum wage. Can each of you articulate your positions on these ballot questions? Mr. Perla.
Yeah, so question 1, when it comes to legislating of the audit, legislative audit, I'm a complete yes. I don't know why that shouldn't be a thing yet to begin with. If an audit is there to make sure everything's being done correctly. So, why not audit it? I don't see an issue with that. The MCAS, I am a yes for that as well. Again, I don't think it should be a requirement. It could be used as a tool for the school system, but making it as a graduating requirement, I think this adds another burden to the students, especially as diverse as a lot of our communities are in Massachusetts, where some are good test takers, some are not. I just don't think making a requirement is necessary. Question 3 for the unionization of the Uber Lyft. I'm a no for that. My stance on that is you're signing up to be a part of this service. So if you're signing up for it, you know what you're getting into. Why would you want to unionize yourself if you're already signing up knowing the details and the conduct that you're going to be doing for that? So no for that. Question 4. At this point, I'm a no. I know there's a lot of medicinal reasons right now for that, which I think is great, and I know there's a lot of, definitely for the mental health aspect. Recreationally, maybe down the line, but right now, keep it to the medical side of it and keep working on that aspect, because I think there's some great things when it comes to that avenue. And then question 5, I'm a no for that. A lot of my server friends, bartenders, business owners are completely against it. On the other side of that, you have both presidential candidates saying no taxes on tips. So now we're going to get rid of the tipping, make it a wage, and then tax it again. So again, I'm a no for that.
Representative Higgins.
So for question 1, the state legislature already has a third-party audit done by a non-political party that is publicly available. So I'm going to be voting no on question 1, although I continue to fight for more transparency measures in the rules and have fought and spoken on the House floor for more time for votes, making sure that we have 72 hours for everyone to know what we're taking up in the legislature, and we've made some progress with some of those efforts in terms of making our committee votes more public. Question 2, I'm standing with our students and our educators and their parents voting yes and eliminating the high stakes portion of the Massachusetts, the MCAS test. Question 3, I'm voting yes to allow rideshare drivers to unionize if they want to. They should be able to do so. This is a complicated labor issue where they continue to be misclassified as independent contractors. They don't have control over their workplace. They don't get to set their rates. And some studies have shown that their employer is setting very different rates for drivers with similar records. And the question is, what kind of discrimination is happening there? Question 4, I've served on the Mental Health Committee for the last 8 years. And there's so much promising research around the medical treatment with psychedelics, that this is really being used and promoted by veterans communities who really need new treatments for PTSD and severe depression, and the upside is just so promising. And then question 5, I'm standing with workers in supporting question 5 to raise wages for our tipped workers, to make sure that they're getting a minimum wage and they're getting tips on top, right? This is gonna lift wages, and in the 7 states that have implemented this already, they've seen wages go up and the ticket prices only go up minimally, 2%.
Okay, so when we have our 5-minute discussion on this one, just, a couple of the ones that we really haven't, what's interesting to me, question 2, in this politically polarized electorate that we have, where we have these camps or sides or whatever, it seems that question 2 has a lot of broad consensus. So as part of the 5-minute discussion, I'd like to discuss, question 5, the tipped workers question. I feel that one's sort of gotten the most exposure and the most talked about. As a matter of fact, on one of our other outlets on FATV and LTV, we have Fitchburg Leominster All Politics. We devote an entire show on it. But question 2, question 3, I feel really aren't getting a whole lot of discussion. Maybe on this, as part of this, let's just expand on this a little bit. Why do you suppose there's such broad consensus on question 2? Just each of you take a few seconds to.
Because I just think not everybody's a great test taker. Not everybody can open up a standardized test and answer the questions correctly. I wasn't ever a great test taker. My daughter isn't. I know my wife wasn't. No offense, sorry. But I just think it's, the standardized testing, it wasn't until 2004, I think it became a requirement. Before that, there was no, you had the SATs, but you had nothing that required you to pass to get your graduation. You have the other side saying, well, it's such an easy test to pass, you got to pass at a 10th grade level. Yeah, I get that, but sometimes it could be 3 years before someone actually gets to pass it. That added stress, and the teachers, the students, I just think it's, again, a great tool to use to see where we stand maybe as a school district, but maybe not as a requirement that we put into place.
And then what are your thoughts on question 2? Why does it enjoy such broad support?
Yeah. So I grew up with the MCAS test. I was the first cohort of students, and I'm someone who excelled at testing, right? And it opened a lot of doors for me. But for 700 students every year, they can't pass the MCAS, and we should not be holding their diploma hostage for that. They've met every other metric. The MCAS and standardized testing was really meant to be a tool for states and districts to figure out what communities needed a little more help. And in so many ways, the MCAS test has been distorted to pull resources out of communities that are having trouble, that aren't seeing the highest test scores. It's going to continue to be there as a tool for the state, as a tool for school districts to really pinpoint where extra help is needed. But we shouldn't be holding up our students' opportunities and keeping them away from getting a diploma because of this test. And we're only one of 7 states who still have this standard. And it's just really important for us to support our students, make sure they have what they need, and that they're excelling.
And in question 3, the collective bargaining rights for ride-share drivers. One thing that you had said, Mr. Perla, is, well, they know what they signed up for. Isn't that the case with any job in the 21st century or the 20th century? You know what you sign up for, but isn't it still, I mean, part of employee rights to be able to, or contractor rights to be able to band together if they feel to?
I agree. No, you definitely have a right to, you know, definitely collective bargain. You have a right to form a union. That's everybody's right. To Representative Higgins' point, right now they're individual contractors. You know, so they're signing the contract saying, I'm signing up for this. This is what I'm signing up for. This is going to be the rate. This is what I'm going to get paid. So going back to that, it's like, well, if you know that, why would you want to unionize? You know, it's just like, it's like me starting a new job, I mean, like, and be like, I want a union now.
And, you know, the fact that they're independent contractors, I mean, does that provide a distinction for you in terms of why this is a little different than, let's say, an auto worker or something like that?
I think there's so many ways that these workers are being exploited because there are some perks to this job, right? Like a lot of flexibility, the ability to cash out at the end of the day. We work with a lot of folks who are living actually in our motels, paying out of pocket for every night. And they can do that by doing 20 rides on Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, because they know that they'll have a safe place every night. But these corporations are taking advantage of that. They can shut them off without a whole lot of recourse and not know how to get their job back. They need to have more protections. And beyond that, the independent contractor status, I'm hoping that we can do more to kind of curtail that, because corporations should not be able to just say you're an independent contractor because we thought you were. We have a really strong 3-pronged test in Massachusetts to protect workers, because too many are being exploited because they really want work. They really want to be able to earn that living, but they're not understanding kind of all of those other benefits that they're giving up, that we require every single one of our smallest businesses to require: earned sick time, paid family leave, all of these other things. An Uber and a Lyft driver, they're not an independent contractor, and they should have the right, if they so choose, to form a union.
About 20 seconds. Anybody else want to throw in anything brief on the questions, ballot questions?
No one's forcing you to sign up for this, you know, to be an Uber or Lyft driver or a DoorDash or whatever. So you don't have to take the job if you don't think it's great for you.
All right. Next question. Well, to both of these candidates' credit, other than comments or criticism about their particular votes in office, their particular decisions in office, you don't really hear much dirt about Sal Perla and Natalie Higgins. So congratulations, guys. But in other races, federally, statewide, locally, that's not necessarily the case. In many other races, you see brought up the personal decisions, personal conduct, and in some cases, criminal records of people running for office. So at what point and in which instances do you believe that character matters? Representative Higgins, I believe it's your turn.
Yeah, we're community leaders, and I think people hold us to a higher standard when we're representing not only our communities, but the Commonwealth. So I think character matters very deeply. And I am concerned about the way that elections have moved and the way that people talk about candidates. For me, I started running in 2016, and a lot of my colleagues, especially my female colleagues who have left, the legislature has said part of the reason for leaving was it's gotten really mean. I didn't understand that there was a different way for it to be, and I'm hoping that we can really focus on the issues and continue to focus on what matters. We both want the same thing for our community. We want to make sure Leominster is stronger and that the state is stronger and our families have the opportunity to thrive. We have different ideas on how we're going to get there, and I'm hoping that that's where all of our debates can center.
Mr. Perla.
You know, I think it goes a long way to your point, you know, how nasty some of these elections can be, but I think there's a lot to say about when there's respect, professionalism between candidates, you know. There doesn't have to be this nasty back and forth. You can disagree on topics, but debate them in these matters professionally, you know, with the facts we both believe are true to us. Piggybacking on Representative Higgins, you know, we all want what's best for the community. You know, it just might be different ways to get there, but I don't think neither one of us wants to bring Leominster backwards. You know, that's neither one of us our plans, I don't think. Our plan is to make Leominster stronger and continue the great community that Leominster really has, and keep being the poster child for Massachusetts throughout the state.
Okay. Any follow-up by either of you? So let me just throw out a couple of things. I mean, over the years, it seems that we have more and more focus on these things. Personal conduct, character. You know, in 1972, a major party presidential candidate, Edmund Muskie, had to drop out of the presidential race. Just totally got wiped off of the primary ballots because he had sought mental health counseling. Okay, something like that. Gary Hart had a fling with somebody, a single fling with somebody, and that totally torpedoed. He was one of the strongest candidates that the Democrats had. You've had other instances, you know, Republican candidates. I can think of a couple instances in Massachusetts where, you know, there's been one little thing that they've done, and they've just totally, you know, destroyed their campaign. And yet we're seeing, number one, we're seeing more and more investigation and more focus on people's personal lives. Yet, at the same time, you're seeing more and more tolerance of things. Because then you had, okay, you know, a few years after Gary Hart, you had Bill Clinton. Make Gary Hart look like a choir boy. You have Donald Trump, obviously, is the most public example of this. So what do you think accounts for this? More and more scrutiny, yet more and more tolerance. Do you think it's almost like a boomerang effect, that like the more you investigate this stuff, the less that people care about it? Or you can start again with this.
Yeah, I think my hope is sometimes, right, like we're all human, we all make mistakes, we all have challenges that we're facing. I'm thinking about mental health and substance use. And I think for me, what I've seen with my colleagues in the legislature is the ones who authentically lean into owning the challenges that they've had or their past lives and how they've learned and how they've grown, right? Constituents see a lot of themselves in them, and that makes people more relatable. And they know that we know how to walk in their shoes. I think, so there's some plus side that I don't think that folks should just be canceled if they have like one mistake, as long as they're willing to step up and do the work to earn the trust of their community again.
People make mistakes, you know. I don't want to say tolerance is probably to your word, you know. We shouldn't tolerate it. You know, certain things can't be tolerated. You know, when you're serving your people, to the Representative Higgins' point, you know, people make mistakes, but you're representing a group of people in your community. You know, you should be the utmost professional, the utmost respectful person in that community. When some of these investigations come out, it's almost they're hiding. So if you're hiding something in your personal life, what else are you hiding politically? So when you have these different issues that get brought up personally, you know, it just, you gotta, I think you have to be an open book when you run for some position, and don't be afraid that things might come out, and you got to be upfront and honest about it.
Okay. Anything else to add for either of you? Okay. We'll move on to the next question then. Over the last 40 years, Leominster has had an easier time making ends meet than its sister city, Fitchburg, has. Many attribute this to Leominster's highway access and a stronger tax base due to brick and mortar retail, big box stores, factories, choosing the more accessible city. However, in our new online, remotely connected world with big box retail struggling and industries being squeezed out by cheaper labor costs in other states and other countries, this edge may be going away for Leominster. How do we ensure that Leominster's tax base remains strong? And I should just say as a reminder, these state reps, this is a very specific district. The city of Leominster is the one district. It's very rare to have a district that corresponds to a city like that, but just Leominster. So how can Leominster continue to stay strong? Mr. Perla.
It's just keep looking for alternative options, you know, if it be other manufacturing, other up-and-coming ideas that people have out there. The AI is huge right now. They're talking about reopening 3 Mile Island just to do Microsoft's AI platform. What else is going on out in the world right now that we can bring into Leominster and develop here? Keep the tax the way it is. You know, make sure we have it beneficial for a business to open up in Leominster. It's the total state, though. You know, Leominster's great, but we got to make sure that we have the policies and taxes, I guess, if you want to say, that insightful for businesses to open up in Leominster.
Yeah. I'm going to lift up the good work that the North Central Mass Chamber does of bringing folks together, making sure we're bringing in new businesses, more businesses with higher wages, but also making sure that we're giving the resources that our schools need to educate our students for a new generation of work. Leominster's benefiting from the Student Opportunity Act, a bill that we passed to reform the education formula to make sure that the state is lifting up communities like Leominster and Fitchburg. For Leominster, in the 4th year of implementation, that means $18 million new dollars coming from the state. That is a huge investment that's coming year after year so that the school district can invest in resources, in staff, in direct student learning, and entice more families to choose Leominster. And then some of the other work, as Leominster's doing well, and we're seeing kind of property prices go up and more people are coming from the Boston area out, we're also dealing with the flip side of that it's getting harder and harder for the people who call Leominster home to be able to continue to afford to call Leominster home. And we're working with too many elders who are trying to find a safe place to continue to stay here in the community that they've spent decades of their lives here. So we've got to really be making sure that we're continuing to be as inclusive of a community. The strength of Leominster really comes from our economic diversity, being a gateway city, that we're a working class community, that we could raise families and lift up everyone. And, you know, we have to focus on kind of everyone across the socioeconomic spectrum to make sure that they've got what they need in the community.
So kicking off our extended discussion on this question, so specific question to each of you. Day one, you get elected. What are you doing to foster some of the things that you've talked about in that last answer?
I think it's definitely getting with the community leaders, getting with the mayor, getting with local businesses, finding out what their needs are. Is there a need that we can add on to them, support them in one way? Getting with the North Chamber of Commerce, and finding these different avenues that are out there that we could bring these other businesses in to help develop Leominster, help develop the other businesses in the community.
Day one, if you are reelected, day one of your new term, what are you doing specifically? Action items that you're doing specifically to foster some of the things that you've talked about.
Working to implement the housing bond bill. It's a $5 billion investment over the next 5 years to make sure that we're building the 200,000 housing units we need across the state. Leominster deserves to get a huge share of that, to make sure that we have safe places, that we're boosting our public housing stock, that we're repairing our senior elder housing so that we can get people moving in more quickly. And then continuing to focus on education, making sure the Student Opportunity Act is fully implemented, that we're not letting up on that gas, and making more investments, expanding access to higher education. We've made some really great strides with early college, with debt-free community college, and making sure that we're creating more opportunities for Leominster residents to seek out new careers.
So to follow up with some of the housing that Representative Higgins brought up, we got to make sure that our education system can handle that. You know, we have to make sure that we have this. With all this new housing, can we build another school? Are we going to be able to staff that school? As we know, teachers right now, it's not a very lucrative profession right now. But with all these housing that we want to bring into Leominster, our schools, are pretty full right now, and adding these 2,000 extra public housing, bringing all these other families into Leominster, we got to be able to support it with infrastructure and with the school. So we got to be, it's great to have all this, but we got to make sure we can sustain it as well.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, the number one call that we get in our office is folks who grew up here, who are having trouble affording their home, affording their apartment, who have been evicted, who are looking for a safe place to stay. And the hardest calls are those folks who lived here their entire lives. They've retired, their income is limited, and there's nowhere for them to go. So making sure that we're just humanizing what's going on. We have an 86-year-old who was a lifelong renter. He rented his apartment for 42 years and was displaced. He served our country. He was a great renter, and his landlord could make more money renting to someone else. And the path to getting him into safe and more affordable housing is really long and really complicated, and for him took a stop along the way to a nursing home, which is a really expensive, for all of our communities, kind of intermediary stop. He deserves housing, and we need to continue to make sure that we're stepping up and creating those opportunities, because it's the number one thing impacting Massachusetts. Most folks who are leaving are not elders, they're not older folks, it's folks in their 30s and 40s, it's people my age who are looking around and going, I don't know that I'm gonna be able to own a home and raise a family here like my parents did and my grandparents did.
So personally, when it comes to the housing crisis, I know for that as a kid, being homeless at one point when I was 14, knowing that is definitely a need. We didn't have, and we definitely did, but we got to make sure we're sustained. It could be sustained, because we could bring all these people and move all these people around. But when I was at that age, it wasn't easy. I get it, but we got to make sure as a community we can definitely, bring in the other people that you said before into the Leominster from Boston and the eastern side. We got to make sure as a city we can sustain that.
Well, let's move on to the final question of the evening. As of the beginning of 2024, within a 15-mile radius of Leominster, my math may be slightly off, but within an approximately 15-mile radius of Leominster, we had 4 full-service hospitals. An overworked Leominster Hospital, which has shut down its pediatric and labor and delivery wards. Clinton Hospital, which is a smaller facility. Haywood Hospital, which just emerged from bankruptcy. And of course, Neshoba Hospital, which closed its doors this summer. Most agree that this area is now underserved when it comes to healthcare. Progressives say that this is a result of corporate greed and a consequence of free market healthcare. Conservatives say that it's caused by government meddling, and government-run healthcare would make it worse. So, what do Sal Perla and Natalie Higgins have to say about it? And specifically, what is your solution moving forward? Start with Representative Higgins.
Thanks, Michael. Last year was a really hard year for Leominster, and I am never been more proud of seeing the coalition that formed around saving our birthing center. I was born there 36 years ago. I never thought that I would have less choices to grow a family than my mom did, just 36 years later. And, you know, for Leominster residents, I think folks have been, rightfully so, really frustrated with the way that our healthcare has worked, that it has felt like death by 1,000 cuts, watching essential service after essential service after essential service be eroded as hospitals continue to consolidate. We deserve community hospitals. Haywood is an amazing testament to staying true to their mission, even through an incredibly difficult financial time with a bankruptcy, but they tried to preserve as much of their services as possible. And while UMass Memorial decided to close a birthing center that served 600 families, Haywood is still making it work, serving 300 families, right? Like, it is doable, it is figure-outable, we can do this. I teamed up with the North Central Mass delegation to write a bill that rethinks the way that we do the closure process for our hospitals. They get a whole lot of our money, whether it's our own personal dollars in the form of copay, our health insurance payments, state and federal revenue. They should not be able to close essential services. In order to become a hospital and get that special designation, you have to prove what essential services you're going to bring to the community. How many do you get to cut before you're no longer really a hospital? And so we wrote a bill, and we're going to continue to shop it around to our colleagues, that says you can have an essential service hearing process, and if DPH deems it essential to the community, guess what? You can't close it. Come back again. Is it still essential? You still can't close it. Figure out another solution.
Mr. Perla.
Yes. You know, I think this is just a bipartisan issue all around. I think everybody in the community needs the right health care, and us closing hospitals, departments, it doesn't help anybody. You know, I agree with Higgins' bill that she's proposed, and I think it's a great start. We've got to keep building on that. You know, you got to start somewhere, got to keep building on that. But we can't just allow these hospitals to announce that they're closing with no notice, and then, or say they're closing when it's already signed, sealed, and delivered, and then all our protests and everything that we do is for nothing. There has to be a process before when they're exploring the closure, that they notify us so we can come up with plans on how to save a department, a hospital. Because it's not just the services that we're providing, it's jobs. You know, when you're closing a whole hospital like Neshoba, there's nurses, custodians, it's a whole building of local people working that are losing their jobs that have to go find somewhere else to work.
So we'll open up discussion on this a little bit, because this is a seriously important issue, and it's a crisis, quite honestly. I mean, you know, as a kid, we had even more full-service hospitals. You had Burbank Hospital, which was the biggest of all in the immediate area, totally gone. Okay. Then there were some other smaller facilities that are gone. So it's just going to keep happening and happening. So I know that AIR is not in the district. But Representative Higgins, do you really believe that everything, sort of to spark this 5-minute discussion, do you really think that everything was possible was done by the State House, at the State House level, to make sure that that nobody could go in and restart Neshoba?
No, I don't think everything was done. And I think the Department of Public Health has had tools that they have been unwilling to use. And we tested that with the birthing center, and we tested that with the city of Leominster suing the Department of Public Health for failing our city. And so the delegation came together and said, okay, you want the legislative authority, you really don't believe you have it, we'll give it to you. We really want you to preserve these services. And when it comes to Neshoba Valley, I think I'm heartened that the tone has shifted from the governor and her administration from it's just an unfortunate reality that we have to accept, to we're going to try to get the emergency room opened again. That is a testament to the hundreds of folks who showed up, to our fire chiefs and our EMS workers who really shared with her and her team just how deadly this decision of letting this access point fail is. But it's up to us from more rural communities to speak up and be more unified and not let them get away with this. It is the state's job to protect our public health. They need to step up and make sure that we're safe and we have access to these services. They have a whole lot of resources and we spend a whole lot of money on our healthcare, and we have not great outcomes when it comes to comparing us to any other industrialized country. And the birthing center fight is a whole other piece. I am really hopeful that we're investing some more money into community birthing center options. If the hospital doesn't want to provide a birthing center, our community can step up and provide these services in a safe way in collaboration with other hospitals that are still committed to helping families grow.
You know, I think, like I said before, Representative Higgins' bill was a great start. That's something that should have probably been in the books years ago, so we wouldn't be in the situation we are now. I don't understand how the State House could save some hospitals but can't save others. That doesn't make sense, where how they can save Stewart Healthcare, but they can't save Neshoba or even the birthing center of Leominster. Yes, I think more could be done at the State House, and I believe more should be done at the State House.
The one other thing I'll add just on Neshoba Valley, the sticking point has been needing an operator. And I don't think that Stewart has been genuine in their negotiations, or the state has been terribly helpful in bringing an operator to the table. Because there were a lot of other hospitals that got a lot of relief that helped make them transition to new ownership. Neshoba Valley, Kearney deserved that same commitment from our state.
Anything else, folks? All right, well, let's move to closing statements then. And we start with Salvatore Perla, and 3 minutes each for closing statements.
Sure. I might need all 3 minutes, but you know, everybody knows me. I'm a lifelong resident of Leominster, and I really just want everybody in Leominster to be successful, no matter what their background is, where they're coming from. Everybody should have that opportunity. Currently on the school committee on my second term. I'm also very active in the community in general when it comes to the city events, the parades. You know, even during the flooding of Leominster, helping out, you know, cleaning out people's basements, using my truck, going to their neighborhoods and doing what I can to help them because people had nowhere else to go. And then bringing to the dumpsters and helping out the dumpsters during the flooding crisis. You know, people are not happy with the current legislature. A poll that just came out recently by WBUR shows a drastic increase in disapproval on how the Massachusetts people feel the legislature is working and how they're doing. Some of the legislation opposes being audited, something, again, I'm a full support of. Again, audits, you know, keep everybody honest. The current body, it hasn't really done roll calls on showing who's going for votes. Again, something I vote full transparency on roll call votes on that. Again, you know, we talk about education. We got to continue doing our great work on education in Leominster. As we know, the COVID ESSER funds are gone. And we see how that impacted other communities by laying teachers off, ending programs. Luckily, in Leominster, we haven't had to do that, but we got to make sure we don't fall back into those areas and making sure we have the correct funding for those areas. Again, I came from a low-income family. There are times where, you know, we didn't know where we were going to get our food from, so I know how the struggle is with the people right now and what people are trying to survive. You know, again, I wish I had a magic wand just to make this all better for everybody, but we just got to continue to work together, not against each other, to ensure all this happens. Again, it's not getting easy for people, and we just all got to work for that common goal to make sure everyone's successful and can do the best they can every day. You know, I always like to gather information and make the informative decisions. You know, I don't make decisions just because people ask me to or tell me, hey, you should do it this way. You know, there are certain issues I do agree with Representative Higgins on. There are some issues and concerns, again, that's why we're here, that I believe we are going in the wrong directions. You know, I feel that my time on school committee has shown that I've been able to work with everybody. I will listen to people, I'll stand by my decisions, and bring my Leominster views to the State House. And that's why I'm asking for your vote, knowing that I will listen to all sides and make the best decision needed for the community.
Thank you. Representative Higgins.
Thank you to everyone who came out tonight, for Michael and Kevin for organizing tonight's debates, and for Leominster Access and Fitchburg Access TV for filming to make this debate more accessible. I'm forever grateful to the voters of Leominster for the opportunity to represent you, and I'm proud of the work that we've accomplished in the last 8 years. I'm proudly asking for your vote again this November. We've delivered on some pretty incredible policy wins this session, including passing the Phoenix Act. This new law expands protections for domestic violence survivors, defining coercive control in the Mass General laws, and extending the statute of limitations for domestic violence from 6 years to 15 years, giving domestic violence survivors more time to build the network they need to come forward safely. And I continue to team up with the Republican House Minority Leader to hold the State Crime Lab accountable for a backlog of untested sexual assault evidence kits and 12,000 lawfully owed missing DNA profiles. We're grateful that this advocacy continues to lead to more cold cases being solved and arrests bringing justice for survivors. When I first ran to be your state rep, I ran to make government more accessible and to ensure it's working better for Leominster residents. Growing up in a working class family, as I said, with my parents being small business owners, government wasn't a place where they could get help easily when they were struggling. And being accessible meant being a full-time state rep, setting up a district office with weekly office hours in the evenings and early mornings. We've helped over 3,500 Leominster families access essential state resources and programs. And last year was our toughest year. Our community stood united to save our birthing center, and then our community was devastated by a 1,000-year flood. I'm grateful that we established a state disaster relief fund to help us rebuild from this damage, securing $4.1 million in 2 rounds to support the city and impacted residents. And we're continuing the fight to preserve our essential services and now our hospitals with new legislation. I'm proud to fight for Leominster to get the critical resources it needs for our residents and for this community to thrive. In 2019, I helped lead the effort to update our state education funding formula. And again, this is the 4th year of a 6-year implementation, and it's brought $18 million new dollars in state funding so far. Plus, in this legislative session, I've secured additional funding for Leominster priorities, including housing stabilization supports, the Senior Center, Ginny's Helping Hand, Growing Places, Mulch for Military, the Franco-American War Veterans Hall, the Leominster Police Department, and our roads and bridges. In closing, I have a proven track record of bringing state resources to Leominster and working with our local, federal, and state delegations, including both Democratic and Republican leadership. I like to say as a state representative, I'm the switchboard operator of government, always working to find a better way to connect people with the right resources more quickly. And I'm grateful that people reach out to me on their darkest days. I will continue fighting for Leominster and each and every one of you as your state representative, and I'm asking for your vote again this November.
Thank you both. Thank you both for stepping up and running and seeking to serve the people of Leominster. In closing, I would just like to say, I know I sound like a broken record, but I'll say what I always say. It's a shame in this country that it's the local races and the local elections that sometimes get the least press and the least votes and the least interest, when these folks like these and folks like the candidates you're going to see in the next debate, those are the people who affect your lives the most on a direct basis. So, number one, go out there and vote. Number two, when you're voting, don't just check off the president box and leave, or a couple of ballot questions that you like, or a senator or whatever. You want to go down the ballot. These state senate races, these state rep races are, I would say, more important than the ones at the top of the ticket that you're so focused on. So that's just my my advice to everyone out there in TV land. I know the audience here is pretty motivated and they're going to go out and vote, but in TV land, if you're watching, just take that message to heart. I'm Michael Delamonica. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the candidates. Thank you.